you just want to look at these emotional triggers and just say, am I creating this? Am I actually like inviting this in? Because either A, I've got a wound that I've just never been willing to heal, and it's just going to keep showing me and keep showing me and keep showing me until I'm willing to sit in it long
Wow.
enough to figure out, how to heal that aspect of myself or whatnot. Or number two, do I need this just so that I can have energy?
Welcome to This is Financial Intelligence, the podcast not about the glamour of money, but instead the vulnerable and real conversations that we're all afraid to have. Brought to you by Money Club. What's up, everybody? Welcome today to This is Financial Intelligence podcast, where we talk about money. And we do that by not talking about money. Today, our guest is Kelly. And Kelly is out in the beautiful California. Kelly Resendez, her and I got connected through our front runner group. And it's just been amazing to talk to you, get to know you. Every time is such an enlightening experience. And I feel like you have a lot of wisdom to share with the world. So thanks for joining us. And let's jump right in.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Aaron. I'm excited.
It's going to be a blast. You know, what I know about Kelly, we had a conversation maybe a week ago, and it came up that you work with people on their emotional triggers. And I
Yeah.
am fascinated by this because emotional triggers are my kryptonite. And
Yeah.
maybe I just have triggers that are kryptonite, but I certainly feel that my work right now is around noticing and
Mm.
coming to peace with my triggers.
Yeah.
So how did this work even start? I promise we're going to get it back to money, but
Yeah.
how did this work start for you?
Well, it's all interconnected anyway.
Right.
I mean, really, when you think about staying in the flow of abundance, what pulls you out faster is that resistance, right? That trigger. And so the reason why I would say that I got into this work is that when I would say I awakened, if I decided one day, which pretty much occurred at the end of December 2003, like I choose to no longer live this way. I had been suffering for many years without anyone knowing, because to anyone else I had a lot of worldly success, was just a high performer in my industry, financially abundant. I was at just this place where I just had my daughter, so I was just beaming, right, with so much joy. But like, what was really going on underneath the surface was a lot of just what I would say wounding that was causing me to be super achievement focused, super production oriented, always about doing and not about being. And so as I entered into what I would call the consciousness space, I realized, like, oh my gosh, I don't like a lot of the thoughts that I'm having. I don't like a lot of the emotions that I was, what I would say, blocking and numbing with things externally. And so as you kind of get into the consciousness space, you realize really quickly we've got two ways to rewire our brains. One's through cognitive behavioral changes that we can do up here, all about strategy. And for a lot of us that are type A, we can do that. And over a long period of time, you definitely see a lot of benefit from doing that. And then the second way is more of the mindful meditation route, which is going deeper into that wounding, going deeper into, whatever maybe created that block initially. But I was not into the woo-woo space originally. I was like, no, I can up here solve this. And so my emotional triggers became like my work. I just watched myself rather than just being in the experience. I watched myself having the experience. And then I started to like figure out, like, oh, okay, well, if I can watch myself in the experience, then I can become more powerful to not allowing that experience to dictate my behavior or my actions. And so I just created kind of my 4-step process, which I still use to this day. Even though I got into the deeper meditation woo-woo space and have done a lot of deeper wound healing, I still experience triggers. I experienced one yesterday, where it was my perfectionism that got triggered. And it, boom, it can come back. Like, I'm still the 6-year-old, 7-year-old wanting to be perfect, right? And so as you look at these emotional triggers, you just have to, you have to learn how to collaborate with your brain to get through them. I have a lot of deep conversations with myself that are, like you said, like, wow, I noticed that you're getting really fired up right now. It's really interesting that you keep having thought after thought after thought about why this is, not right, or what you could have done different, or whatever it is. And so, I mean, if you want me to, I can walk you through my 4-part emotional trigger series really quick, because I feel more powerful when I have a strategy.
Yes, please.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to use my son. My son doesn't listen to your podcast, or else he'd be really pissed off at me right now. He's always like, Mom, like, why can't you use my sister? And I'm like, because she doesn't do anything wrong. And he's the one that's I love him to death. He's my highly spirited child. So he's 15, teenage boy. So if you look at emotional triggers, first and foremost, I have the mindset that many of us do and share in common, that life happens for me, right? Whether that came from Byron Katie or Tony Robbins, whoever it is known to be true, right? Life happens for you. So number one, my mindset going into this trigger is that my children chose me to teach me the lessons I was unwilling to learn on my own. Wow. So that's how I experience raising my kids. So when they piss me off, I see it as for me. So that automatically diffuses a little bit of the frustration, anger, sadness, whatever it is that comes up. So, I'm just going to share one emotional trigger. So my son struggled in school, and I would come home from work and he would already be gaming before he was done with his homework. Yep. Okay. So this is I've told you before conversation. How many times do we have to have this conversation? Like, that's the emotion. Like, how can it be that difficult for you to know, don't turn on Xbox, right? Until you get done with your homework. And so, yeah, I'm like feeling angry. I'm feeling frustrated. I'm feeling just like seriously impatient with this kid. And so I document, and I really am able to see my emotions as separate, my thoughts as separate. And then, so that's part one, is just being aware. I choose not to react, whatever it is. So I don't go off on him. I don't anything, Number two is find out what my deeper preference is. Because our whole life, we've been building super deep preferences for how other people are going to behave, respond, whatnot, right? We have an idea, which this is all ego, because really, our whole person preference is just, how can I love more? How can I impact more? How can I be less judgmental? All of these other things. And so getting to the deeper preference, it's like, hey, I would prefer that my son did his homework before, he played Xbox. Well, you got to go deeper than that. I would prefer I got one of those kids that was like a 4.0 student that I never had to ask once if he was done with his homework. That was really, because that would have made my life a lot easier. That was my deeper preference. And then even deeper than that was, I wish my son didn't have a learning disability, that he wasn't distracting, procrastinating, because one thing I know about my son, he needs massive activation energy to do anything, which means he needs a deadline. He needs the pressure. He needs me on him. That's how he gets his activation energy. So you figure out what that preference is. And then step 3 is know what my hallucination is if I don't get my preference met. So really, like, what is my deepest fear if he does play his Xbox and never does his homework or whatever it is? And so this is where I like to make things really funny, because it breaks up our brain a little bit, is imagining him sitting there, instead of his 15-year-old self sitting there playing, whatever it is that he's playing right now. I'm envisioning him being 40, right? So now he's 40 on my couch in his underwear, asking me to get him a glass of milk while he's gaming, right? That's like your worst nightmare as a parent, that your kid never leaves. And so it breaks up a lot of that trigger of that, why don't I just beat my frontal lobe to the punch, pull it as far as I can? I know that's not going to happen, because he loves stuff too much. Number one, I know he's going to be a success in life. And then step 4 is choice. It's, can I avoid or can I grow? And I did a combination with that one. Number 1, I can take his Xbox with me. I don't have to leave it there anymore. So I'm more powerful just knowing I can take it with me. Like, it's Groundhog's Day, right? I can take it with me and then not give it to him until he is done with his homework. But I can also grow through it and understanding, like, at that point, he needed a lot more support when it came to homework than I could give him. So I had to get him a tutor. I had to be willing to ask for help. So I had to grow through accepting where he was. And then we become more powerful. And then the trigger over time, like, it literally, I mean, number 1, my kids know all about emotional triggers. And so they're like, oh, I'm just trying to trigger you right now, Mom.
Oh,
You gonna keep your
man.
joy? You gonna keep your joy right now, Mom? Or am I stealing your joy right now? Like, they literally know the, the language and whatnot. But that's how up here I got through a lot of these things. And you do it over and over and over again, and you rewire your brain. Now, I could have gone the opposite direction, which was get really to the root of why I care so much about what other people think.
Right.
Because that's really what it is. Because
Yep.
we do care about our kids and how other people think of them. And so I had to do both kind of at the same time. And over a long period, I've let go more and more and more of what that is.
So this is mind-boggling, because as you're explaining these 4 steps, I'm going through an experience I had yesterday that I'll talk about in a minute. But I just want to kind of overview that in case it needs to be said again. So step 1, be aware, don't react. Step 2, what is the real preference? I prefer that. And you may need to go through a couple layers on that step. What's the hallucination if I don't get my preference? And then finally, what choices do I have and how can I grow through this?
Yeah.
So I love that.
Yeah.
I also think that there's so many areas, when we think of emotions, we tend to isolate that into a small subset of experiences, right?
Yeah.
Romantic emotions or
Yeah.
parenting emotions. But these things exist in business. They exist in the gym. They exist, when it's raining outside, we're emotional creatures. And I think there's a lot of value to that subset. So I got an email yesterday from one of our vendors who's helping us with some trademark stuff. And the email was overwhelmingly positive. It was like, hey, your trademark got approved, right?
Yeah.
And at the end of it, it was like, we'll send you an invoice soon. And it was just an expense that I was not expecting. It wasn't a big one. Wasn't like it was thousands and thousands of dollars, but I wasn't prepared for it. And I noticed that, like, the first thing I needed to do was to email my business partner or Slack my business partner and be like, yo, I'm so upset. And, I think the real preference, and later I communicated this, but the real preference was to know it up front so that I can make a plan, right? That was the only thing that could have happened. Yeah. But I did pause enough to look back and be like, well, this won't bankrupt the company. Like, that's the real hallucination, is that I'll lose everything.
Right.
And if I don't have control over this, then what else don't I have control over?
Right.
And, I love this framework because it can apply to so many different places.
Yeah, because we typically just do the same things over and over. Like, our brain is not very developed, right? It's like, okay, I need to make you breathe. What are you saying to me about my situation? Are you this or that? And, I would tell you that most people stay in thought way too long because they don't want to sit in the emotion of what it's like in that moment, sitting with the disappointment that, how did I not know this? What could I have done differently? And I know for me, I am really generous with my time, and I'm generous with just, how I give, and we can be taken advantage of, right? Where, this business person didn't articulate the expense of what it is. Well, now I know that to be true in my life after experiencing this so many times, that's like the first thing, like, hey, I need to make sure that we really go through this bid or this, whatever it is, so that I don't feel taken advantage of. Because that's been one of my programs, has been always, whether it's just, I'm always the one that have people to my house for dinner. or I'm always the one that pays for drinks. Why doesn't anyone else pay for drinks? You know, that kind of thing. And so we can just look at this and I've got my trigger management platform, like worksheets and whatnot, on my website at Big Voices Rise under resources. Because if you just document these things, it's like they're just tiny little things, like waiting in line, whether that's at Starbucks, Disneyland, anywhere, in traffic, anything. It's just your ego saying there's not enough of it, right? Well, that's scarcity, not abundance, where you should be feeling like there's more than enough time. Why don't I take advantage of this by thinking about things that I could be grateful for, or whatever that might be? So it will help to document your top triggers.
It does. And it's also glaringly obvious when, you know, in the moment you might write one line, but
Yeah.
then after several of those moments get written down,
Yeah.
patterns are right in front of you.
Yeah.
And I think the same can be said for, you know, if you look at one of the jokes that I like to make is that if you show me your calendar and your bank account, I can tell you everything you care about, right?
Yeah,
An idol of mine said that. And it was just, when it was said, I was like, oh my goodness, that's so clear, right? Calendar and bank, that's where your time is. That's where your money goes. That's all you care about.
Absolutely.
But it's ironic that the emotional conversations are not documented to a point where we know our own patterns. And this stuff is fascinating, especially when we can tie it either to our career or our parenting, or money, or like a struggle that we just can't seem to overcome. The documentation process is really important.
So one thing I want to make sure I highlight is energy. So the reason why so many people have emotional triggers is they need them to get energy. So if you're somebody, you know, I love the Tony Robbins 6 basic needs test that you can just take online, because if you look at it, a lot of times our needs aren't being met. So like, let's say uncertainty, right, is not being met. You might be picking a fight with your significant other just simply to get that energetic charge of uncertainty.
Wow.
Like, you just never know where these things are coming from. I know for me in COVID, like the loneliness or the, you know, whatever, it triggers something. And so then all of a sudden, like, we start searching, we start trying to get these needs met. Well, they're not always positive. And so I look at energy creation is that if I can know how I create energy positively, because it doesn't matter, positive, negative, you get the same charge. You get the same amount of dopamine if you get pissed as you do getting like really excited about something. And so you just want to look at these emotional triggers and just say, am I creating this? Am I actually like inviting this in? Because either A, I've got a wound that I've just never been willing to heal, and it's just going to keep showing me and keep showing me and keep showing me until I'm willing to sit in it long enough to figure out, you know, how to heal that aspect of myself or whatnot. Or number two, do I need this just so that I can have energy?
So this is mind blowing right now, because I'm thinking through so many different scenarios. I have a primary need for uncertainty. It drives me. I crave it. Like it's business, it's entrepreneurship, it's relationships. Like I love that. And I can point, I like the way you shared that. I can point to several different circumstances recently where I didn't need to pick a fight. I just needed some kind of fuel in the tank, and I wasn't unclear enough to feel good, because not having the clarity makes me feel like I have an opportunity to grow. Mind blowing. One of the things that we also talked about that I think like kind of ties in here. So, you know, we've looped in emotional triggers and patterns to break them, or patterns to grow from them. I love that the way that sort of culminated was we need emotional triggers for energy. I'm gonna highlight that somewhere. It's starred on my paper right here. But I think in many ways, the direct line to financial intelligence that's important to draw for somebody listening is that these same triggers exist in money, right? If you
Yeah.
feel unattractive and that's your trigger to go spend, if you feel that you're being measured and the way that you will demonstrate quality in yourself is to drive a fancy car, there's so many different ways that we demonstrate this. And maybe to use your language, we are unaware of our real preference, but we use
Yeah.
the money that we have to supersede it or highlight it or cover it up.
Yeah.
I love that. I think that's really important.
Absolutely. I mean, when you think about materialism, right? If you think about like what that really comes from is that most of us all have that desire to be seen, to be understood, and you can look back at a young age and we see so many abundance blocks,
Yep.
developing between ages 7 and 10.
Yep.
Like that's normally where we see the highest number of abundance blocks, where prosperity is just flowing to you, and you have willed, massive success into the universe. And so when you think about what materialism does, it is just it's really just trying too hard with force to be noticed, to be, to be seen. And that was my path. That was my journey from a very young age. And my parents were very proud. My mom moved here from Mexico. My dad had nothing. And so when they got a lot, they wanted to show
Yeah.
how they'd overcome all of these things. Well, I didn't have a humble bone in my body growing up. Now, the cool thing is I didn't have any abundance blocks either. Just simply because my parents were like, if you want it, you make the money. Like, you got to go out there, you got to get it. Like, there's no limitation to what you can create. And I mean, it was amazing. And my parents were very successful in real estate and in business. And so I had this model that was be successful, but more importantly, show people how successful you are. So if we had social media, I would have been the person posting the convertible Mercedes or the trip, here or there, or whatever it was. Like, I spent very lavishly up until I did have my awakening. And I also created an abundance of money. In my 20s, I was a high 6-figure earner. So it was not like I didn't have any, I guess there was just, I never had a, I'm not enough in business. I never had a, I'm not enough financially. What I had was, I have this, but I need to prove to other people that I am these things rather than just being in it. And so I think no matter where anyone is, I had to take a look at myself and realize, like, it doesn't matter. Like, none of the material things, all the time that I spent shopping, and I was serial when it comes to shopping for my home, right? So I had multiple homes. And so it was constantly like every weekend going and getting pots or new furniture, or flying to North Carolina, or doing this or doing that. It was all distraction for not being willing to feel how miserable I really was in my own life. That was the truth of what it was. And until I was willing to face the fact that I really was only happy if other people noticed my success, and I just was like, wow, that is like, boom, like right there.
Yep.
Then I was willing to do the work and stop spending at the level that I was. And my journey with abundance has been interesting, because then my mom got sick. And then I was like, I don't care about money. Well, that's not the attitude to have. I created a block late in life. And fortunately, I still did well. But at the same time, I could have done a lot better when I got back to this place. And it was actually Rock, one of our mentors, Rock Thomas, which inspired me to do this. As we were doing our one sheet, I had not looked at my net worth since my divorce. And I knew I had lost 50%. I was the only, income earner or person with really, that much in assets, just because of the way that our family was set up. And I hadn't looked at it. And then what I realized afterward is one of the top abundance blocks is fear of numbers.
Yep.
And I just didn't want to look at it. And since then, just to be completely honest, my net worth has gone up like 50 times.
Amazing.
Just since that moment. And I was able to then attract in, more of an abundance.
So there's so much we got to like dissect here. So one,
Sorry about that. I kind of tend to do that, Aaron.
it's okay. I'm the same way. So I think a really important key to just highlight is the transparency in getting addicted to things
Yes.
as ways to declare our worth,
Yes.
right? I've been there. I know a lot of my peers have. I think in many ways, sort of mother culture invites that so quickly now. And one of the challenges that we're really adamant about moving to solve or towards a solution through is helping young adults figure that out sooner, because we're just now in this highlight reel game of you've got to consistently one up your last thing.
Yeah.
And so it's really wicked, it's really gnarly. And I want to get to, I definitely want to talk about the awakening, because I think that moment, sharing that moment might hopefully help someone wake up before needing to get to that point. But you also talked about, fear of numbers, fear of measurement. I think even that is why there's a lot of fear of budgeting. We're working on developing our money positioning system to help, the average person take note of where they are and where they want to go. And I think a consistent part of that dialogue is, what if someone's really afraid to look under the hood or rip the Band-Aid off and see the scar tissue, or see that they're not where they want to be, or identify that it's not all like roses and rainbows, even though I might be living like it is.
Right.
Right. And that becomes an interesting piece of that story as well. So let's jump to, you've gone through this lifestyle where it's very lavish, it's luxury, it's posh, it's all cool, fine and well, but you've got this corrosion, this necrosis inside that's eating you alive, and materialism is kind of the fuel.
Mm-hmm.
What wakes you up? What shakes you out of that, and how can we learn from that?
Absolutely. So my experience was one that happened over time, but then there was just like that magical moment where it all came together for me, because I think sometimes our ego can be tricky. Two things that my ego's been tricky on is that, it can convince ourselves that, oh yeah, no, you're totally driven by, contribution and love and growth and whatnot. And the significance piece is out the window, but personal growth can give us a lot of significance too.
Yep.
And so we've got to be aware of just how tricky our ego is. But I had thought that I'd let go of the materialism, just in doing a lot of studying, whether it was under Eckhart Tolle or just other places. And so in December 2007, I was hosting a holiday party at my 6,000 square foot home in Granite Bay, and had, the caterers, the DJ, I had gone to San Francisco and got my Jimmy Choo shoes and got my hair done and whatnot. And I had just come back from LA, a workshop that Maria Shriver hosted, and was with Eckhart Tolle and discussing New Earth, which is all about really letting go. And I came out of it like I let go, like I'm totally not attached. And during my party, my house burned down. And when I mean burnt down, it was not, this was, I mean, you could probably still Google it, but it was like some noticeable weird things going on during the party, like lights going out and then some water coming through my ceiling fixtures. We get everybody out. I had 120 people at my house at that time. And we get everybody to the street, and all of a sudden one of the roof tiles, you could hear it pop, and 7-story fireball goes up, and the entire house just poof, gone, right? And thank God for amazing friends. Thank God for people that like had pulled some of my my childhood photos. A good friend of mine, Steve Schmidt and Jamie Cohen, pulled stuff off the walls, and another friend got my cars out of the garage and our computers. I was like, wait, we got to go back and dance. Like, can't we just wait? Like I was in another planet. But overnight, everything gone except for my children and my husband at the time, and amazing friendships. And I had never been somebody that received before this happened. I was always the one, my giving was how I got my significance. I always had more to give, right? And that's how I got a lot of it. And all of a sudden I had to be open to hundreds of people wanting to get my children Christmas presents, and I didn't need them to, but that's what people need. They need to feel like they can support you, help you. And it was a great exercise for me, because I was able to then rebuild a life post. Not that I didn't still have a nice house or whatnot. It just no longer defined me. I didn't need to post pictures of it. I didn't need to be, in that same place. And so it was really, truly my awakening of just, I do not need any of these things. And over time, I've just downsized and simplified. I'm definitely a minimalist now. And I still like nice things and going nice places, but to a level where it's healthy.
Yeah, there's like a misconception that minimalism is having no things.
Yeah.
And I love that you use the word simplify, because like deep down, I think we probably resonate on that. It's
Yeah.
high value in the things that we own. Everything has high utility. It's got a purpose. It's got intention behind it, rather than this like amassing target of like, well, I've got more, so therefore more is better.
Yeah. Well, and I believe wholeheartedly in the abundance flow mentality that 10% of what you earn should be spent lavishly.
Yep.
And fortunately in my world, that's a pretty significant, amount. So I love going on trips. I love being able to take my kids, hopefully post COVID again. Just had to cancel an African safari, but it's just one of those things that you just need to be thoughtful about. This is not who I am. I don't need to post pictures of it to get people's attention. I am humble. That was the one piece that my parents didn't teach me growing up, was that humility aspect. Like, I don't need external validation. Now, thoughts still come up. They still come up, but I'm able to see them as separate than who I am.
Yeah. Well, hopefully for you listening, you don't have to have your house burned down, right? I think there are ways to, it's a really important distinction, when you decide to make these changes, right? You had decided to, in December 2003, make a change. There's some magic that comes from just finally drawing that line in the sand and saying, hey, I'm moving forward.
Yeah.
But I hope that there are people that can have an awakening without needing that kind of awakening.
Yeah, and when you look at awakenings clearly, most of the time, I'm sure there are a lot of people that are awakening right now, right?
Yes,
they're awakening that I don't know how to be alone, or I don't choose to be alone, or I really need to create a better foundation financially so that I never feel this way again. No matter where you are, it's just facing the truth of where you are. And I know that we're going to talk a little bit about that now, but it's just acknowledging, like, here is where I am. I have a lot of negative thoughts about my body, my money, my this, my that, my money, whatever it is that you do, but knowing that there's infinite possibilities for you to live and choose a different life than what you're experiencing right now.
Yeah. So let's have that talk, and then we can kind of close things out. So we were chatting before we started about, this opportunity that we have in front of us really is about dealing with change and how we cope with change and how we make choices. But, we've gone from a world where there was a lot of have tos, and now we're in a world where we are required to make choices in order to keep the same routines or keep the same patterns or make the same kind of income or find new ways to make income, right? Those things have shifted much more to be in our influence. There's a lot out of it, but what's an example of how that's showing up for you, and what are you dealing with it in a way that could help somebody listening in?
Yeah, I mean, I believe our most valuable skill, whatnot, is just really being able to face adversity, regardless of what it is. Because that's even if you're in flow, like, trust me, my last 7 years have been, most people would think I should be on the floor in fetal position with the family challenges that we've had. And it doesn't make any difference. Like, really having that in spite of mentality of, in spite of anything that I get hit with, like, I'm going to find opportunity in it. Like, no matter what, it's just that mindset is your gold. that emotional intelligence level where you build resilience, and everybody's different. I mean, I had parents that if I fell down, they said, get back up, go do it again. Some people had parents that pushed them down. Like everybody's experience is much different. However, choosing and in spite of, no matter where you are, is really, that's what you've got to get through. And knowing that diversification is going to be necessary. I mean, I've been in the mortgage industry for 20 years, and this is like a no-brainer for us. It feels like 2008 was COVID, or other markets were, no matter what it was, we experienced something new. And I think I love that. I love the up and down. I have a platform in mortgage and real estate. It's called Foundation to Sustainable Success. Well, there's nothing sustainable or anything foundation like in that industry other than who you're being. And that's what we've got to focus most on, is just who am I being in this market, and what opportunities do I have to feel more confident, to feel more resilient, to feel more impactful, on a daily basis. And then knowing, hey, I'm going down. Like, I have the awareness to know, like, whoa, I'm going down a little bit. Like, what is my lifeline? And you and I had a great conversation about that recently, where it's like, the darkness hits us all. There's I mean, just because I live in flow doesn't mean that I don't have resistance that pops up. I just know my plan, and I know my go-to. Like this morning, I listened to Marissa Peer on Lewis House podcast, which I love her perspective on anything. Number one, I love her voice. I don't know if you've ever listened to Marissa, but she's from England. And it's just, the way that she looks at everything, it's just, all you have to do is learn how to talk to yourself better. It's that simple. Like learn how to talk to yourself better. That's it. You're putting the images in your head by the conversations that you were either having or don't know how to readjust. If you have a conversation in your head that's like, oh my gosh, we're never going to get through this, you have to be able to come right behind it and say, everything's always working out okay for you. We've got a, I posted something, so I've got 100% track record of surviving anything that I've ever gone through.
Any bad day ever.
Right?
I love that. In so many ways, we're experiencing all these challenges, and if you haven't put in the work on your self-talk, or even if you're not aware of your self-talk, I think what this has brought to light is that where the traditional definition of success was once, money and cars and material things, it's now, we've kind of hit this transition period, but clear resilience, clear value add, clear opportunity is very much like centered inside of us.
Yeah.
Where I think for many, many years, it was centered outside of us. Yeah. And now we're starting to, we've looked at the science, we've looked at the math, we've looked at the history and said, no, success is actually determined internally first, and then represented in this outcome. But this process of asking these questions, learning our triggers, deciding to find resilience, deciding to pivot or change or adapt, that's all here in the heart. It's amazing.
It is. And, I mean, some of the work that I've done has been more in the, like, what is the difference between feminine wounded and masculine wounded? Because we have both, right? And so when you look at both ends of that spectrum, it's just, how do I find this place where I'm just me? And most of our reactions, if we're seeking, that's our wounded feminine, right? Like if we're longing for any of these other things, or we're holding on too tight, that kind of thing is over on that side, where the anger and the frustration and I can't believe this is happening again, what, blah, blah, blah. We just have to be an allowance that that's the experience that maybe we need to sit in for a minute. And I would tell anybody that's experiencing right now, like the fear, the anxiety, the financial aspect, it's just get yourself back into the mindset that I am the creator of my own reality. I'm the creator of my own success. And it doesn't matter where I am today. I need to learn how to create more images of my future than I have of my past. Because
Really?
that's where the emotions come from, right? We have a thought, our brain creates an image of it, we sit in it, and if we think about whatever it is too long, we get thrown the other direction. You just have to learn how to create those images of what you want your future to be like. Like you might be dead ass broke right now listening to this podcast and you're like, whatever, like you're already successful. I haven't always been that way. And it's just, you got to be open to, I can feel like a millionaire and not have any money in my bank account. And I'm going to be much better, stacked towards getting there.
Yep. Yeah, this example is really, I think, a great one to highlight the, the confident athlete, the, successful entrepreneur, the resident that's going through like hell week in nursing school, right? Like all of those phases are much easier to go through when we already exist on the other side of them.
Yeah.
And when our we know that these are characteristics that we get to define, but I think in many ways it's also a choice, right? It's a choice to change, right? I'm drawing the line in the sand. I'm not there now, but I'm gonna do what's necessary to get there.
Absolutely. And then just really understanding abundance blocks. I mean, so many people see a successful guy that doesn't have any ability to be present, or woman, whoever it is, they're miserable. And they're like, I never want to be like that.
Right.
Well, we can't make the assumption that everybody's like that, or that, money is the root of all evil, or whatever blocks you have. Like if you want to create a greater abundance, like you got to take some time and really sink into what might I be blocking? What beliefs have I maybe accidentally picked up on along the way?
We love to pick stuff up along the way, don't we?
We do. Our stinking brain, I swear. I mean, that's my favorite thing, is when you really recognize, like, I need to learn how to collaborate with this machine a little bit more. And it's not like your laptop where you tell it what to do. It goes rogue. I mean, it tries to run its own programming because it's like, oh, Aaron, I must protect you. You got hurt before. Like, I must create some thoughts that, keep you from feeling to that level, because you said last time that you were going to die if you ever felt this way before. And I got to keep you alive. Like, we never know what our brain is doing. So we've got to be aware of what we say.
I feel like, if my brain were my best friend, he'd be really annoying. Like I would fire him as a best friend.
Yeah.
Like, bro.
Yeah.
Why? Don't talk to me like that.
Yeah. Well, and that's a great point, because, I started in the consciousness space with Eckhart Tolle. And if you've ever read his stuff, it's not easy to read, right? And then many years later, you read like Untethered Soul, which is so much easier to comprehend, and talks about it as being like the roommate that's next to you, that's constantly, getting you to try to eat pizza and drink beer when you're trying to stay healthy. Like, however you need to separate from your thoughts, like that's what you gotta, somebody emailed me this morning. They're like, what if I made them all like cartoon characters? That was a question that somebody asked me. I'm like, I don't care what you make them, just make them different than who you are. I name them. Like, I have my attention seeking self, I have my victim self, all of these other names that I've created. So that I'm like, wow, that's interesting that my victim self just showed up right now. Wonder what that is.
I feel like in many ways we could probably all name our, like, I feel like I want to give mine proper names, like Frank or Kevin or Mary. Just I'm gonna spend some time doing that, I think.
Yeah. Well, remember that comedy show many years ago that had all those people that you could see in this person's brain? That's like what we're dealing with, right? And and I experience life. I have success in so many areas. Like, I feel fantastic about all these areas. And then yet in the relationship space, it's still been a challenge. And so I think what happens to a lot of us in personal growth and development, we put so much pressure on ourselves. Like, you should be able to work through that. And it's reminding ourselves, like, it's not always work.
Yep.
Like some of it's just being an allowance that it will come. Like you've already shot what you want into the universe and that kind of thing. And now, like, just remember that the more we focus on what's satisfactory in our life, the better we stay in flow. But when we look at the areas that might not be working too much, like your finances or business right now, like take the focus off of them. Don't work so hard. Just know that flow comes with ease.
I think that is a phenomenal piece of wisdom. I got to write that down. Um, so Kelly, where can someone find you? Where can they learn more about
Yeah,
what you're into? And if they're like, I got to talk to this girl, where do they go?
absolutely. So you can just check out my website at bigvoicesrise.com. And I'm an email away at kelly@kellyresendez.com. And what I would say is that no matter where you are in your life, being open to this idea that like asking for help, sharing with other people. That's why I love like what you've done with your group and whatnot. It's just opening that door and trusting that opportunity is going to flood in, the right connections are going to start to come to you. And I've got a course on there, and you can check out my book too. But I would say for myself that the biggest message that I could ever share with anyone, especially in this time, is that, you got to check in with yourself. And so many of us don't realize, and I love this, Joe Dispenza reminded me of it the other day, and then I read it in a devotional, that we must learn to linger in gratitude much longer. Like there's a lot of type A's on the phone. We're just constantly like, gotta get stuff done.
Yep.
Like really, really sink into this idea that if I linger just a little longer in what I already have experienced, what I already have, what I already know is coming, like be grateful for the things that aren't even here yet. Like it will create a lot more abundance for you.
And that pause is really, really hard.
It is.
That pause is hard.
It is.
Kelly, thank you so much for spending some time with
Absolutely.
us. This is I got to go back and listen to some of this again, because I think there's just so much to it at the surface, and then there's another layer beneath it that is really kind of the gem. You walked us through these 4 steps, walked us through your shift from materialism. Like there's just a lot here. So I am so grateful to be a part of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm
It's
sure
been
that
a pleasure. Super fun.
this is great. And I'm sure that a lot of people are going to be just very connected to being as open as you were. So thanks for like walking us through the stories that, not
Yeah.
everyone is willing to share. So I appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Aaron.